Welcome to Mark's British Airways Fleet Update, looking at short and long-haul fleets.
It's time for another update on the British Airways fleet here on Mark's Planes, Trains and Trams. Lots to report on, so over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's have a look at the short-haul fleet issues first. Relatively minor incident, one hopes, but Golf Tango Tango November X-Ray, one of the pretty new British Airways A320s in the fleet, only entered traffic on the 6th of July. That headed up to Edinburgh on the 6th of October, but appears to have had damage incurred from an airport jetty. That aircraft is still there. Maybe we'll have to see what's going to happen with that aircraft to get it repaired and on its way. Also, quite a lot of interest in the flight of Golf Echo Uniform Papa Zulu from London Heathrow down to Newquay. That aircraft flew as the BA 9272 on the 4th of August. Debate on a number of the British Airways web forums about whether that aircraft has gone for maintenance at Newquay to get some stuff repaired that would be outsourced to a local maintenance provider, or whether actually the same maintenance provider is actually going to do one of the other things that it does down at Newquay, which is to part out the plane and scrap what's left. Wasn't expected that Papa Zulu would be the next to leave the fleet. Maintenance appears a more likely scenario, but we're still waiting for some confirmation of that. Well, one of the more interesting developments in the past few days will affect the British Airways fleet perhaps more in the long term than in the short term, and that's emerging news from the British Airways parent group, IAG, that their 737 MAX order is actually going to be headed to their subsidiary Vueling based in Spain. So that would involve that airline gradually over time shedding its A320 fleet and taking on the 737 MAXes. Now, some of the Airbus aircraft in the Vueling fleet are relatively old, and one can imagine them being withdrawn, scrapped, possibly sold on to other entities in other parts of the world. But equally, there are quite a few airframes in that Vueling fleet that I'm sure IAG will want to keep its hands on. And it's already been speculated that some of those aircraft will be making their way to Iberia, where they'll either be augmenting the fleet or they'll be used to dispense with some of the older Airbus aircraft in the fleet. Now, looking at the size of the 737 MAX order and also the size of the current Vueling fleet, I think it's entirely conceivable that we'll see that approach cross over to British Airways as well. Maybe to the British Airways mainline fleet, potentially to the Euroflyer fleet to augment the aircraft that are already there, but possibly to replace some of them. So that's quite interesting stuff. Of course, the challenges at Boeing with industrial action and certification mean that it's probably unlikely we'll see any of those 737 MAXes entering service with Vueling anytime soon. So the IAG group have got a little bit of time to sort themselves out and make their mind up how they're going to manage that. Well, let's move across and have a look at the long-haul fleet and talk to you about what's going on there. Quite a lot of activity. I spoke last time I gave this update about some of the recovery that had been made with the British Airways A380 fleet. But sadly, over the last week, they've had further challenges. Echo Lima, which is the youngest A380 in the British Airways fleet, was not returned to service from its planned maintenance. And what that meant was that a 777-300 had to substitute for its booked flight to Los Angeles. But then, as you can see here from this flight radar extract, further flights were cancelled. So I'm afraid disruption on the network operated by A380s continues. Let's stick then with the Airbus A380 fleet and talk about the maintenance arrangements out in the Philippines at Manila. That's a long flight to the Lufthansa Technic facility that BA use. And of course, British Airways quite keen to avoid having to pay for that flight in each direction, to pay for the fuel and the crew, which is quite a lot of money. So British Airways try and use the BA11 flight out to Singapore, the BA flight back, the BA12. And that's what happened on the 12th of October. Echo India, which was the next flight requiring maintenance, positioned off an LAX flight at Heathrow, did the BA11 to Singapore, arrived on the 13th of October. The same day, Echo Hotel had finished its maintenance in Manila, positioned to Angeles City because there are no slots from Manila in the evening, and then flew Angeles City to Singapore. The aircraft were swapped over on the ground. Echo Hotel flew back to London Heathrow on the BA12, and Echo India headed off to Manila for its maintenance. Now, last time an aircraft came back from Manila, it ran into difficulties straight after that first flight. But Echo Hotel made its way to Miami straight after arriving from Singapore. But sadly, the return flight from Miami on the 14th of October, the BA206, was cancelled, and it would appear the aircraft has run into technical difficulties. I suspect British Airways won't be very happy with this. It's the second time in a row that an A380 has come back from Lufthansa Technic, from its maintenance, and run into difficulties. Now, the A380 fleet did have a few days of performing well, but now Echo Bravo also ran into difficulties on that day, and the BA11 to Singapore and its return flight, the BA12 on the 15th, were cancelled, although the aircraft appeared to have been repaired fairly quickly because the next day it was off to San Francisco. But the big news this week really around the British Airways long-haul fleet is the developments around the 787. And British Airways has really come clean about the fact that it's suffering a serious issue with its Dreamliner fleet. It's really suffering an engine part shortage on the part of Rolls Royce. And British Airways has said publicly now that it's disappointed. They've had to make a number of changes to their schedule as they experience delays to the delivery of engines and parts from Rolls-Royce, particularly in relation to the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engines that are fitted on the 787 Dreamliner. And a number of changes have been announced to the British Airways schedule that was planned for this winter. And really those changes fall into three areas. First of all, the start of flights to Kuala Lumpur from London Heathrow in November has been postponed to next April. So that clearly frees up an aircraft, reduces the risk of cancellations, but all those customers have had to be moved on to other flights. The other change that British Airways are making is they're cancelling one of the Gatwick services, Gatwick to New York JFK. There's obviously a lot of Heathrow JFK flights, and no doubt passengers will be moved across onto one of those, or maybe a flight to Newark. Now, I'm not necessarily anticipating that one of the Gatwick 777s will move across to Heathrow as a consequence of that. What we have seen recently with the Gatwick 777 fleet is an inability of British Airways to keep 11 of the aircraft out of the fleet of 12 in service simultaneously, and that has led to, in some cases, cancellations from Gatwick, in others, late starts where they've stepped up departures, and in other scenarios we have seen the Heathrow 777s being flown across to Gatwick to operate services, although they have significantly less seats because they have a more premium heavy seat layout. So I suspect the British Airways will be making that change really to make sure that the Gatwick operation can be self-contained and resilient within its own resources. Although it is possible, perhaps they're trying to release a Gatwick 777 to support the Heathrow operation. Time will tell in that respect. The other flight that is being removed from the schedule, which has only just gone back in, is one of the Heathrow Doha flights. So British Airways was not flying Heathrow Doha at all through the pandemic and in the couple of years subsequently. But the new schedule that they'd been running recently had 2 Heathrow flights a day, and one of those is now being removed from the schedule, cancelling flights. And of course, they're also suffering from not having standby aircraft available. I also understand that British Airways have delayed some planned maintenance on the 777 fleet. They've also delayed the fitment of club suites to a few of the 777s that are left and the 787 fleet, partly to keep aircraft in traffic during the busy summer period. Now, the other developments on the 787 fleet that I guess it's worth talking about is recognising that challenge they face with the Rolls Royce engines. So a few of the 787s have been out of traffic for quite a while. 7878 Zulu Bravo Juliet Echo has actually been out of service in Cardiff, parked up at Cardiff since the 7th of July. And in addition to that, there is a 7879 Kilo Oscar that's been parked up at Heathrow since the 25th of June. Another of the 7879's Kilo Foxtrot made its way down to Cardiff for planned maintenance. We are expecting Juliet Bravo to see its club suites fitment complete soon. It's due to be replaced by Juliet Charlie. Now, you may wonder, and so have a few other commentators of the British Airways fleet position, why British Airways don't take one of the aircraft that's waiting engine parts and put that through the club suite fitment program. Now, lots of people will tell you why that doesn't work and it's very difficult, but that might help them improve availability. So let's see what happens. They've also got one of the relatively new 787-10s, Lima Delta, that's been out of service for some time, awaiting a engine component since the 23rd of September. Now, the other thing to report with the 787-10 fleet is the newest member of the fleet, which is the 11th of 12 787-10s with Rolls Royce engines. That aircraft has undertaken 5 test flights out of Charleston Airport in South Carolina, and hopefully that aircraft will be handed over to British Airways shortly and will be making its flight across the Atlantic, probably to Cardiff, where it will finish off a few issues of fitment, be commissioned, and then it will make its way to Heathrow and probably enter service immediately. So that brings us on to the 777 fleet. Hopefully, by the time we do the next update, Golf Sierra Tango Bravo Bravo will have had its club suite fitment complete, and that aircraft will return to service. It's been out of traffic since July, so it's another of these aircraft that British Airways has had out of action, out of service for quite a while, which clearly isn't helping with this challenge around fleet availability. Now, as I put the finishing touches to this video, I can see on the 17th of October, there's a flight plan filed to get this aircraft from Cardiff back up to London Heathrow. So hopefully that's a sign that club suites fitment is complete. The aircraft's ready to return to Heathrow and ready to return to service. There's also been a few 777 aircraft having maintenance and serviceability challenges, which has seen the Gatwick fleet struggling a little bit. A Heathrow aircraft has been supporting the Gatwick fleet on some occasions. And in addition, one of the 777-300s in the Heathrow fleet, which is Bravo Lima, went technical in Los Angeles and ended up having to be given some attention in the American Airlines maintenance facility and then headed back empty to London Heathrow. In a fast-changing world, that brings you bang up to date with what's happening with the British Airways fleet in short and long haul, and I'll catch you here on Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams for another update very soon.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe and click the notification button so you don't miss any of the great trips Mark has coming your way on this YouTube channel.